Morning.
Good morning. Can we pause?
Did it go well yesterday, the rest of the day?
Is it okay to pause the recording right now? Welcome, everybody. We're just going to wait a minute while everybody is entering the room. It is wonderful to see you this fine morning. Happy Wednesday morning, everybody. Hope everybody had a good start to the day.
Good morning, Miss
Good morning.
Renee.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. I'm so excited to see you this morning. I was actually going to say I had a little bit of a rough start with one of my 15-year-olds this morning. 15 is a fascinating age, you know.
You just wait for 16.
Oh no, Miriam, don't say that. I'm not ready.
Just wait.
And I have to tell you,
wait.
I have a boy and a girl that are 15. So I have twins that are 15. So I'm so excited to see you guys this morning because I'm guessing I'm not going to get any attitude from my colleagues, right?
I'm not.
Oh man, but that's just where kids are, right? So it's wonderful to see everybody today. We are so happy to have a chance to come together. And I'm really, really excited for our first speaker of the day. Dr. Wrenn, Rosemary, is a friend of mine, and she is a leader of thought. Rosemary is somebody who will question and make you really think and have a lot of like reflection and introspection on just different topics. Some of them that are hot in the media right now, but also at the core of the foundation of education. And so I'm really excited today that we're going to be talking about cultivating critical conversations and what that looks like. And I want to give everybody a heads up who's on. This session is often a session that is given to university supervisors and college professors and teacher preparation leads. And we have a lot of students with us right now. So we're thrilled that you're here because we're hoping that in your career, you will become a teacher, and maybe some of you will go on like William Salazar. I want to see you as a professor one day. You know, I believe in you guys. And so we want to see you have lots of options and opportunities. So some of the content today might be a little heavy because the intention is that it's supposed to be, and it's supposed to really kind of jar you and get you thinking. And so, and it's not, you might not agree with everything. And that's exactly what reflection is about. And that's exactly what figuring out who you are as an educator is about, what your identity is. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Rosemary. We are so thrilled that you are here today. Rosemary, I see some people that are still coming in, so I will continue to let everybody in, and I'll be watching chat. And I will get quiet right now. So Rosemary Wrenn, we will give it to you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm so glad to have you join me today. I believe that our future teachers are, I'm resting my hope for the future, not to put any pressure on you, but I'm resting my hope for the future of our society on you. Because in the course of doing my graduate work, in the course of working with young people, of working with future teachers, I've come to realize that teachers hold so much power to guide our children to be able to be good humans to one another and to lead our society in a direction where we have a truly beloved community, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about, where we can have hard conversations. And a lot, like what Renee said today, I just don't mince words. So I tend to just go directly and talk about certain things that maybe you haven't talked about before in a space like this. And that's the whole point, folks. We got to talk about these things. So I hope that you are all doing great this morning. I saw one comment in the chat that there was someone having a hard time hearing on their end. So please let us know if you're having any technical issues. And you know what I haven't done? I'm going to, let me see if I'm going to enable the live transcription. Hopefully you will be able to see that. I keep forgetting to do that, but now hopefully if your sound does cut out, you'll at least be able to follow along if you're able to see the captions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And while I'm doing that, it would be awesome if you could drop in the chat your name, where you're joining us from, and are you a future teacher, a current teacher, another kind of educator? We just love to know who's joining us today. And at any time, if you'd like to post a question to the little Jamboard that I created for today, there's the link. And I'll try to pop it in there anytime, because we can't have conversations if we don't have questions, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Some of you I got to meet yesterday in the workshop on culturally sustaining pedagogies. If you couldn't tell from that, I care a lot about these things. And as a white woman, I am a participant in perpetuating some of the problems that are in our education system. And one of those problems is we don't like to be wrong, and we don't like to talk about hard stuff. And so I'm here to hopefully start a change in that direction. You probably already have started your own changes. And I really hope that you will contribute to the chat any ideas. Renee is amazing about following up on things. And if you want me to stop, if you have a question, make sure to pop it in the chat, or use a little raise hand, and we'll make sure that we include your contributions, because this is as much about what you have to say as what I have to say. Because a conversation isn't just one person talking, it's all of us participating. All right, and so as I did yesterday, I'm going to take this time to acknowledge the land that I'm on, the land that the two schools where I work happens to be on. And I acknowledge the Yaktichu Kichu Yaktilhini Northern Chumash as the original, current, and future caretakers of this land and culture in the area occupied by Cuesta College, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and my home where I am right now. We are in Tilhini, the place of the full moon, and we gratefully acknowledge, respect, and thank the Yaktichu Tichu Yaktilhini, Northern Chumash tribe of San Luis Obispo County and region, in whose homeland I am a guest. And yesterday I spoke a little bit about moving beyond a land acknowledgement and actually taking action, because we can do all the words that we want, but if we don't step up and actually contribute to a solution, it's all just words. And so if you're curious to know what land you're on, you can follow the link down here on the slides. That you'll have a link to my whole presentation. And I encourage you to not just find out which land you're on, but find out who the people are who are descendants of the original inhabitants and caretakers of your land. And what are they doing right now? Because in my community, we have, I have the honor of a relationship with one of the elders in my local tribe. And she has been very gracious in teaching me more and more about the land that I'm on, about the story of her family that has been on this land for thousands of years and is currently driving an effort to declare a federal marine sanctuary, the Chumash Heritage Marine Sanctuary, to protect the land and the village that's actually under the bay where we live right here by the ocean, which is beautiful. And so what can you do? How can you step up to give back to the community that you are in? So no, this isn't a talk on Indigenous peoples, but I do think that it does influence the work that I do. And I hope that you will take this into consideration. My family is an immigrant family. They came here by choice. And I know I am on stolen land. So my effort is to support the work that is going on in the community right now that owns the land where I live. So to start off our talk today, I wanted to share this, sorry, my mouse goes crazy. This comment by Paulo Freire, who is a philosopher, educator, and really one of the key elements of critical pedagogies, meaning we're never quite satisfied with what's presented to us. And he says that knowledge emerges only through invention and reinvention, through the restless, impatient continuing, hopeful inquiry human beings pursue in the world, and with each other. And what does that mean? That means I would love for you to share in the chat what that means to you. I know what it means to me. And honestly, it kind of can change depending on the day, but like, what does that mean to you? Knowledge emerges only through invention and reinvention, through the restless, impatient, continuing, hopeful inquiry. To me, that means that we never know what we don't know all the way, that there's no end to the way that we generate knowledge. And one of the ways that we do that is by being in conversation and collaboration with one another. And sometimes that means conflict. And some of the best things come out of conflict as we work through them. And so keep this quote in, I encourage you to keep this quote in mind as we go through some of the information I have to share with you today. And also to think about, yes, absolutely. I'm looking in the chat and I see it. Claudia is saying that there's a social aspect of learning and new ideas. And Heather is saying we should be in ongoing reflection. Crystal, hi Crystal, through innovations and reinventing what we know and build upon what is needed, embrace each other's known knowledge and known needs to build a better tomorrow. Crystal, I love encountering you in these conversations because you always bring a light to what we're talking about. We don't have to say we know everything. Okay, teachers, when I ask my new students every term, what are they excited about learning about teaching? What are they scared of being a teacher, or what intimidates them? Almost everyone says, I'm afraid I won't know the answers to my students' questions. Guess what? I don't know all the answers to all the questions either. And I think that being ready to know that you won't always have the answers is really important. And to show, it demonstrates to our students that we're lifelong learners as well. Renee, I saw your hand was up.
Sorry to chime in here, but I got to say it's really important to model the not knowing and the exploration of knowing. And no matter what age that you're working with. So working with younger children, you could have something come up where you say, oh my gosh, I have no idea. Can somebody find the information out and bring it back tomorrow? So then they can access adults or other people they could talk to possibly, or look online. When you're in a college class, if any of you choose to be professors, one of the best things you can do is say, I'm not sure who can find it fastest. Thank goodness for technology, because we don't need to be the keepers of the knowledge. When we can say we don't know who can find it, and then suddenly that person gets it, that's very powerful, So I love this conversation, but also modeling that vulnerability is important.
Thank you, Renee, for pointing that out. And that goes to the entire talk I did yesterday too on culturally sustaining pedagogies. And I think it was interesting because I got a lot of response to this comment I made about teachers being scholars and researchers. And the idea that teachers are generating and creating knowledge every single day, and our students are cultivating and creating knowledge every day, and validating our students' contributions and their ability to create knowledge and to create understanding is important, because it is part of them feeling like they're an important part of our learning space and of our learning community. I'm going to take a moment. Renee asked for the link. Let me just get that and I'll drop it in the chat.
Thanks so much, Rosemary. Sorry to interrupt with that, but I know these are great slides and I'm sure others will want to be opening them up too. Thank you so much, Rosemary.
Yeah, and if I can find the chat bubble, I do not like when, oh, there it is. Okay, so I will drop the slides right there. And then also I've shared with Renee and Leah a link to the entire folder that I'll be mentioning a lot of different articles. And so if you want to read up on more of these ideas, I have a whole folder that you can access later on this week. So just a little bit about me and who I am. I am a continuing scholar. I told folks yesterday, I'm not an expert necessarily. I don't like to think of myself as an expert. I like to think of myself as a scholar and someone who, like Renee said, is always asking new questions. I have practiced the things that I talk about. I've researched the things that I talk about, but I certainly do not own the knowledge here, and I respect and appreciate your contributions to the conversation. I teach at Cuesta College and Cal Poly SLO in teacher preparation, and my research interests are how do we prepare teachers, our future teachers, to be more prepared to talk about challenging things and to navigate issues of race and racism in the classroom. And I am coming to you from the premise that our entire education system has racism woven throughout it. And so if that's hard for you, please ask questions. And I do have the receipts on that. I've done the research, and there are elements of it throughout our systems. And that's what we're combating. So as new teachers, we're walking in these classrooms, that there have been these systems in place, these power dynamics, where we have the teacher up here and the student down here. I really appreciate, and it makes me feel pretty nice to be referred to as Dr. Wrenn, but with my students, I go by my first name, because I am looking at ways to break down these barriers between students and this perception of the teacher having all the knowledge. Like I said, our students contribute just as much to the conversation and to our knowledge as we do, no matter how many degrees we have. That's my personal opinion. I might have colleagues who disagree, so always ask. But that's just one of the ways I try to walk my talk. So what we're going to talk about today are, you've already done this, you've been introducing yourselves. We're going to talk a little bit about what's termed in our community as critical conversations. We're going to talk about Singleton's work and his 4 agreements, about how to structure and set them up. What are critical conversations? Why are they important? How do we facilitate them with our colleagues and students? So as Renee said, this was initially a talk that I gave this summer to university supervisors, and those are the folks who go in and give feedback to student teachers. So some of you might be at that point in your training, some of you might just be beginning, or some of you might be faculty. So I hope that you can take what works for you out of this talk today and implement it in your sphere. And then you're going to get to talk to each other. So these are the 4 agreements that Singleton has in his book about critical conversations. And also at the last slide in this deck is a resource list of all the references throughout this talk. So the first one, and it seems logical, to stay engaged. So especially right now, and full confession, I was a full-time online student in my graduate program. So I know how to multitask in Zoom. I get it. And even when we're in person though, we have these distractions around us constantly because of our phones, because of our thirst for knowledge and followings on social media. So if we really want to have a tough conversation, it's going to be really important that we're in a space where we're not going to let ourselves be distracted. Now, it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you get distracted or all of a sudden you realize you had to call your mom, but do your best to get yourself in a space where you can give this conversation your full attention. In a classroom, that might mean that you change the space where the kids are. So my little trick for having conversations with my young students when I teach elementary school is, if they're in their desks, I move them to the floor and I sit right there with them on the floor. If they're on the floor and I want to change the subject, I'll move them to the desks or have them, let's go for a walk outside. But change the space so you remove the distractions. Speak your truth. So the first one's probably, you might have thought that one was hard, but let's look at these other 3. Speak your truth. This is hard. Because on the surface, we probably all want to feel like, yeah, of course I'm telling the truth. I'm not making this stuff up. This is real. But really take a minute and do a little reflecting. Are you really putting out there what matters? And sometimes speaking your truth is really hard. I was in a meeting on Monday night on a very sensitive subject at one of the schools where I teach. And I had a lot to say, but I took my time. I actually wrote it down because I knew every word that came out of my mouth was really important, in that I really wanted to challenge my colleagues without shutting them down. Okay, so speak your truth, but reflect. So the part of these conversations is reflection. It's self-reflection. It's being willing to say, I don't have all the answers. It's also being willing to say, there might be a better way for me to put this out there. Number 3, I'm gonna I told you I'd just tell it like it is. I'm tired of people telling me they're uncomfortable in conversations, especially conversations about identity and race and racism. Who's uncomfortable? Who's being made uncomfortable by these critical approaches to learning? It's folks who look like me. Because guess what? All of my Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and other people of color have always been uncomfortable to some degree in our classrooms. And I say that from research and observation. It is not my lived experience. But every time I hear about a school saying, well, nobody should be made to feel uncomfortable about their race, so we can't teach anything that would make people uncomfortable, they should just replace that people with white people, because our Black, our Latinx, our Indigenous, Asian, and all people of color have been pretty darn uncomfortable since the beginning of our education system. So I frankly think that in my feeling, it should be an uncomfortable space for white people in these conversations, because it has been uncomfortable for everyone else for time immemorial. And then this is also hard for white people. There might not be a resolution at the end of the conversation. So sit with that. There might not be an answer. There's a list of designations of white supremacy tenets that show up in institutions. And one of them is this quest for perfection. Why? Because we want to be right. Because of course we've been at the top of the power grid all along, and we want to be right. So we have a real hard time as white folks not getting an answer at the end of a hard conversation, especially. So I want to take a moment, because I see a bunch of people have been throwing things in the chat. Okay, wow. Okay, I can't even read them. They're coming in so fast. These are awesome.
Rosemary, I'm also looking at the Jamboard, and there's some movement on there as well. So
Okay.
if you want me to share things, I can, but I can also be silent. So you just let me know. I've got it up.
Yeah, well, right now I'm tired of listening to my own voice. So I would like to see, I would love to see folks who would like to participate. So don't hit enter, but what comes to mind when you hear critical conversations? I've kind of given you my context for it. Now I want to see what yours is. So type it in the chat, but don't hit enter yet, because then you're not on the spot. Everybody will do it at once. Okay, one more moment. 3, 2, 1, hit enter and let's see what we come up. Critical race theory, truth, impactful conversations, must have conversations, introspective, reflection, helping each other out. Oh, I love that. That's wonderful, David. Thank you for that. Race, serious discussions. Oh, necessary conversations that not everyone wants to have. Generations. All of these are critical conversations. A lot of what I'm talking, oh my gosh, Suzanne, that's awesome. It's a conversation where critical thought is happening, not criticism. Thank you so much. And I'm not going to go into a talk on critical race theory here today. That's a whole nother session. But again, this reaction to any sort of critical pedagogy is again rooted in this perfection trait that we see in a lot of our institutions in this country. And so when we hear the word critical, we think that somebody is criticizing us, which that might happen. But really, critical just means looking at something and evaluating it and thinking about, is this thing worth my effort? Uncomfortable but necessary. Okay, you all are amazing. All right, so it's great to see that we have a nice variety of interpretations of critical conversations, and all of those are right. Those are all involved. So I'm gonna share with you one definition. It's not the only one, and I think you'll see a lot of your responses reflected here in this collection. So critical conversations invite us to inquire, reflect, and act. So yesterday I talked about this part here, the act. We really need to make sure that we are taking action, and we need to follow through, and we need to not just talk about stuff. Don't let perfection be in the way of getting something done or progress. We need to address socially constructed concepts like race, gender, class, ability. And like just right there, that's hard to do in a lot of our settings. And you're thinking, well, how I teach 3-year-olds, how am I supposed to do this stuff? Well, actually, they're the easiest ones to have these conversations with, because they don't mess around. They just ask you a question and give you an opportunity to address some of these hard topics. We decenter colonial and white ways of knowing and invite inquiry. I have to laugh because I was talking to my daughter. She teaches 2nd grade. She has taught her students to practice the vocabulary word decolonialize. So they have been practicing that word, and she's up in Oakland, and so they're learning about the Ohlone people. And she said, Mom, they think every Indigenous person is Ohlone. And I said, well, that's not entirely wrong, because my understanding is that a lot of Indigenous peoples consider themselves related to one another in all different ways. And so colonial means that we're looking at the ways that European, Western, United States interests have taken over the land and people. Yeah, so that's like a whole nother lesson that we could explore. But instead of focusing always on the white guys who won, who were the people that were already there in a full civilization beforehand? Disrupt the status quo. So these conversations throw this color blindness and color muteness out the window. So color blindness, we talked about these both yesterday, is saying, oh, we're all the same. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, we're all the same. When we say that, we're not acknowledging the stories and ways of knowing of folks who do come from different socially constructed backgrounds or identities that differ from our own or from other members of our group. And color muteness is this like, oh, it's not nice to talk about race. We should not talk about these things because it's not polite. It's going to upset people. Go back to the top there. Who's it going to upset, or from that first slide, who's it going to upset? It's going to upset the people who have not been upset. And it's going to give folks who have not been acknowledged in the past a space where they can speak up. And so critical conversations are centered on the sources of inequity in our schools and society in general. So why do we need to have them? Well, because this is not having them, not caring about these things, avoiding them because they make us as the educator uncomfortable just because we don't know if we'll have the answers. It's hurting our students. Our students who hold Indigenous identities are harming themselves and having suicidal thoughts and behavior in many ways because they are not appreciated or valued or even seen in their classrooms. They go to a football game and see their culture mocked because of a school mascot or emotion in an action that is related supposedly to their ancestors. So we do this for our students. Our students need to know that they can trust us. And like Renee was saying, and a lot of you have put here, being vulnerable is super important. We need to show our students that we're human, because sometimes they don't think we are. And having these tough conversations is really powerful way to provide them the validity of what that they matter enough for you to pay attention to what's going on. Not talking about race and other challenging topics makes them worse. Let's take a look at the last few years and just see what practicing this avoidance of talking about hard things has done. There's a whole attitude that talking about race is racist. It's literally the opposite. It's acknowledging a problem that we have that we need to look at and solve. And finally, this one scholar, Pace, she talks about intentionally bringing up hard things with her students. And I love this question. Is it right for kids to learn about these issues from TV and radio and social media when we know how incendiary those things are? Our college students need this. So a lot of you are faculty or other educators. So this is also directed to you. And I say this because I get students every semester, every quarter, who have felt erased or invisible in their classrooms. Would you stay in a place where you didn't exist to other people? Would you want to be there? As teachers and teacher educators, we need our own racial literacy, and we need to provide it for our next generation of teachers. And my research was involved. I worked with teachers who are like my age, who are white women, and every single one of them did not feel equipped to have these kinds of conversations. So as teacher educators, as peers of other teachers, it's our responsibility to be willing to engage in these tough conversations. And we were talking yesterday in my ethnic studies for educators course about how do we better support kids and get the punitive surveillance out of schools, is by building trust. And by being vulnerable with our students, by being willing to go to these hard places, we build relationships with them, because we can't have trust without relationships. And with trust, we have a hope of building community, and then creating space for conversations, empathy, and different ways of knowing and being. So I'm gonna take a minute to look. There's a lot of amazing stuff going on here in the chat and conversations. I want to leave time for us to actually have our own little conversation towards the end of this, but I wanted to know, Renee, if you saw anything on the Jamboard or in the chat that you think we should address before
there's something really important actually that I think Suzanne Edwards-Acton brought up. It's at 9:34. Oh, she must have just put it. Sorry, there's so much going. I thought it was like a couple minutes ago.
I'm
But
gonna turn off
calling the conversation hard, scary, tough puts the two in a sentence that affirms, biases the thought. These are important, necessary, learning, empowering conversations. Name it as an asset. I love that, because I think that too, where I'm like, oh, critical conversations. And I kind of, because we want people to understand that it's not necessarily going to be light and upbeat. They're going to be pretty serious. But I love this idea of important conversations, necessary conversations. We're going to be learning together. But there's so much rich in the chat right now. I mean, there's Crystal saying a lot that is really relevant. Gabriella is sharing a lot as well. I mean, a lot of people are contributing.
So, so I want to address just first off, I agree with you, Suzanne. As we lead into these conversations, I think that's why I have this issue when I'm in a group where people are saying, I hear white women saying, it's going to be uncomfortable. We're going to talk about this topic and it's going to be uncomfortable. Well, like you said, why don't we just talk about the topic that needs talking about? And because when we do say it's difficult or hard, we're giving people a way out to say, oh, it's too hard for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do appreciate that. Thank you, Suzanne. But another thing I want to point out here is look at what's happening in the chat. Y'all are engaging in critical conversations. You're thinking, you're reflecting, you're inquiring. Those are critical conversations. Okay, and exactly, Suzanne, let's stop using the excuse that these are too hard. Because like I said, some of the most intense and conversations I've ever had have been in a kindergarten classroom where a young person will just come up and say, well, Rosemary, why? And I'm like, well, let's work on that. And, so
true.
Because they have no filter at that point, right? They're just asking, they want to know. And so, I don't know if we have any Ted Lasso fans in here with the be a goldfish thing, where it's like, if something bad happens, be a goldfish, forget about it and move on, right? So if someone asks a hard question for you, just do what you can with it and then move forward.
Rosemary, mind if I chime in for a sec? I love that you made the kinder reference.
Yeah. Well, I taught, side story, I taught sixth grade for a really long time. I love sixth graders. I'm super sarcastic, as you might figure out by my manner here. And I love the older kids because I could just mess with them a lot, right? And I had to deal with my kindergarten teacher. I said, I will never make you teach my kids if you never make me teach yours. Then that kindergarten teacher, who is a dear friend of mine, had a horrible health incident, and I ended up teaching her class for the last part of her year. Oh boy, did I learn so much. Okay. And I had worked in her classroom. My twins were in her classroom when they were in kinder. So I learned so much just by being like a bug on the wall in that classroom. But yeah, little ones. So they're not too young to have conversations. They're not too young to have conversations about race because they notice it. And the studies are showing us that infants, like 3-month-olds, can recognize race. And children are starting to make their ideas and their own beliefs at that age. You all know, you early childhood educators know way more about that than I do. So I just thank you all for, I thank you all for your contributions to the chat. And I don't even know how far we're going to end up getting through all these different, we got too many slides. So let me just go through them pretty quickly. I wanted to give y'all a chance to talk in pairs. So let's see. All right, I can't see my own title here. So Mika Pollock is a scholar who I follow a great deal. She's the one who talks about talking about race and like stop not talking about it. We got to talk about it. So we need to uncover these socially programmed beliefs. It's really interesting reading my college students' homework assignments because you see the color blindness all over the place. I will treat every child equally. Every child should get the same from me. And I'm like, let's unpack that a little bit, right? And so thinking about like these conversations, if you didn't ask them to reflect or you didn't ask the question, you'd never know. And it wouldn't give you the opportunity to have the conversation. Just assume that the conversations you have, race is going to come up. It's everywhere. It's in the way we sign up for classes in college. It's in the books we read. It's in our teaching books. That's another story. And it helps us to build a shared knowledge base. So whether it's in a classroom with your classmates or in the teacher's lounge with your colleagues or at a big, huge administrator conference, being able to just slide into this conversation is an incredible tool and will really help us to improve our situations. So some more information from Singleton, some principles that he talks about are passion, practice, and persistence. Like any other skill, you won't get it unless you do it. And for some folks, we need to rip the Band-Aid off and just start asking these questions of ourselves and each other. So keep that in mind. Possess a racial identity. So if you're a white person, you probably haven't had to think about your race a whole lot growing up. I didn't. Before white teachers can be very effective in these conversations, we have to interrogate who we are. And we have to see, how do we identify? Me, I'm fully half Irish and fully half Italian. My mom was a first generation college student. I don't think either of her parents, I think they finished high school, but her parents were Italian, fully Italian, not super educated. My dad grew up on a teeny little place in Charleston, Illinois. They didn't have any, like a real rich story to tell me. And I do know they had definite ideas that I was raised with about race, but I was never thought that there was anything that I had to be accountable for. And I have found that as an adult. And so I've been doing that work. I'm not done. I'm still doing it. So I encourage you to explore and figure out how do you see yourself as a racial individual? Yes, race is a made up thing, but it has very real consequences. Be vulnerable. Be vulnerable and realize that you're not, again, there might not be an inclusion. Be intentional and intrusive. And so this Carpenter and Diem talk about critical conversations in leadership. So I'm talking to you administrators out there, you leaders, and a leader is a teacher too, is a kid too, is a student, but do it on purpose, like bring it up on purpose. Not to start a fight, but to start a conversation. Go first. So it's really important, like Renee was saying, is for us to show that, yeah, we aren't completely resolved with where we are right now either. And we're going to do the work. So I always tell my students, I never ask them to do something I'm not willing to do myself. And that included running the mile with them when I was 6 months pregnant, when I was teaching PE. So I never ask students to do something I won't do myself. And again, intentionally go up and ask your colleagues to have this conversation. How with children? Oh my gosh, please just answer their questions when they ask. If a child asks you a question and the response is, oh, well, that's not that important, don't worry about that, we'll talk about that later, you've just denied the validity of their knowledge. And you've just told them they don't matter. Not explicitly, and I'm sure you didn't mean it, but that's the message they get. Renee and I are going to put something together about tribes, which is a way of setting up your classroom. Again, there's a good rationale for that title. And community talking circles are one of the most amazing tools that you can implement in your classroom as a practice, as an ongoing practice, so that when you do have a problem in your classroom community, you sit down just like you sat down yesterday and asked what everybody's favorite color was, or what makes you happy, or what's your favorite ice cream. And this time when you sit down to talk about why someone threw something across the room and hurt someone else, how does that affect our community? Addressing conflict when it happens, not avoiding it. And when you have a curriculum that is set by your district or county or school that you understand to be missing some information, and I'll say that nicely, you have the power as the educator to bring in the stories of the people who are missing from that history, from that book. And I have shared with you a link in the materials to a running list of children's literature that I use in a course that I teach that does fill in a lot of those blanks. Culturally sustaining pedagogies. If you weren't in my session yesterday, this is a link to the book by Django Paris and Sammy Halim about what that looks like. And this is the link to the books. There's a couple, these 3 books in particular are excellent ways to start a conversation with kids from 2 years old to 30 years old and older. I read these books to my students in my Cal Poly class the other day. Not for them to study as literature, but to share with them as a way that they can get these conversations going with their own classes. So I don't know, I think we have not really got enough time to do this the way I would like to. So maybe what I'll do, so my idea here was to have y'all go into breakout rooms and have a brief conversation. But maybe we'll do that too. Let me just stop this. I'm just going to have you. Now I can't get back to Zoom because my computer is being weird. Okay, there it goes. How about this? How about we just go in for 5 minutes and give each person gets to introduce themselves to the other person and just share maybe, I was going to have you all talk about something that's tricky, but I think instead, why don't you just share out? There's so much conversation going on here. Why don't you just share out how you might take this with you from here and how you might be able, like something that came up that bugged you about what I said, or something that has motivated you to look into more about how this works with your students and your colleagues, and just have a brief conversation about like some things that you're thinking about here. And I'm just going to have it be, oh, Christy, Thanksgiving. You know what? We should have had a whole session on that. We should have had a whole session on that.
Rosemary, let's just plan it. And so then maybe we roll it out at summer next year or something. So that way everybody can come right before the school year kicks off.
Yeah.
And then do something on Rosemary and Renee's take on Thanksgiving.
Well, and it wouldn't, like, it's not definitive, but like, I'm going to tell you a story. And I told this yesterday about one of my participants in my study. Very nice lady. And we can talk about nice. Let's have a real long talk about nice. But nice white lady like me, my age, teaching 2nd grade. Everyone at this school loves this teacher. And she's in charge of like the equity committee at her school. And she was doing our 21-day challenge. And when, and she was distraught when she found out 2 years ago about Thanksgiving, because a parent in the classroom came in and said, so this is 2 years ago, she's just finding this out. Yeah. And a parent came to her and said, you know, did you realize, you know, I'm not comfortable with my kid participating in this learning. She was dumbfounded. She was aghast. And what her solution was going to be was, I just didn't want to teach it at all. I was just not going to talk about it at all, which is, again, one of Okun's white supremacist traits that I know I go to when I get intimidated. And it was really, really interesting, because here's a woman who has so much experience, has so much love for children, wants to be serving her students, and had really had no understanding of what to do when faced with this new information. Yeah. And Erendira, I am not sure the answer to that question too. So another thank you. I'm kind of tired of hearing my own voice, but I appreciate that y'all want to hear.
I think it's also because we only have 6 more minutes together, which makes me sad. Rosemary, we need to learn from you more.
Oh, you're sweet. Well, I'm still learning. So I would love to have a broader conversation, and maybe what we can do, Renee, is set up in some future session a way that it is more contributory, so that it's not just me talking. And what we could do is set up some spaces where we could have some guidelines and have some of these conversations and talk about them really quickly. If you're not sure what we're talking about Thanksgiving, it goes back to how we look at Indigenous peoples, and why I took so long this morning talking about my local community. First of all, the story of Thanksgiving is completely made up and incorrect. But it's a really cool story, isn't it? Right? It makes us feel good. And that's why a lot of our history books are full of things like the Thanksgiving myth. And that's what I call it anymore. Right? It's a myth. And it's one of the most dangerous, well, there's a lot of dangerous things, but one of the most dangerous things it does is it situates Indigenous peoples in the past, which is exactly what the effort to erase them would like us to do, right? And pretend they're not there so we can take their land and their stuff and their traditions and their really cool designs and everything, right? it, it by situating them in the past and not talking about where we interact with Indigenous peoples today, it's erasing them. Okay. And yeah, the story of Thanksgiving is completely designed to show us the power, the white power situation, and the settler colonial situation. And there's a really good book, and it's on that list that I shared with you. And it's called We Are Grateful. And it's also written in Cherokee, which I cannot pronounce, but it gives the pronunciations for it. And it's written in the Cherokee script too. And what that book is awesome for, and you all can get this, it's online, there's video read aloud. You don't even have to go get the physical book, but share it with your students if you can. It shows Indigenous people being grateful all year long through all the seasons. And it's this really cool combination of showing folks in their traditional dress and contemporary dress, all in one picture at the stomp dance, which is also a reference to the elders and the reverence they have for their community. And I have to admit, one of my favorite pictures, or some of my favorite pictures, are where the mom or perceived mom is sitting at the table and the person who appears to be a male person is helping to do the dishes and serve at the table and has the apron on while the female person is sitting there and taking care of the baby and all that kind of stuff. So I love that book. It's written and illustrated by two Indigenous women, and they just came out with another book called We Are Still Here. So if you are a person who's interested in, like, well, if I can't talk about pilgrims and Indians and hats and turkeys, what can I talk about? Those are the kinds of things that we can talk about. Okay. So I encourage you to check out those books and look for resources. There is a lot out there right now to choose from. So, okay. So I'm sorry that we have 2 minutes left. There's so much in the chat. I wish I could address them all, Renee. I think we need to have like
Rosemary, I'm going to throw something out. Why don't we, like, after we wrap Teach for LA, let's talk in the next few days and see if you'd be willing to maybe come and do an intensive, like maybe we do like a 2-hour or something. Yeah. I don't know. Because it sounds like the need's there. Like, if people want that, just say yes, thumbs up or something to like let us know, put it in the chat, and then we can try our best to make it happen. Yeah, we can. That's the thing. And that's the kind of educators we are, is like, who's in the room and what do they need, right? So COP, actually, our communities of practice. And I'm seeing in the chat, Rosemary, that I think it's a yes. So we'll need to make a plan. Absolutely. I'm there because I came to this work very late. And so I'm trying to get as much done as I can for as long as I can. And I appreciate you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you all chatting through the whole thing, because again, I was a fully online student for my doctoral program. And I have one of my colleagues, I see Sam is here again today. We had some gnarly conversations in the chat. And I really like when I see a chat, even if I can't read all of it, it means you're engaged, for heaven's sake. So thank you for contributing to this conversation. Renee and I will make something. Renee will make pretty much anything happen. And I'll show up for it. So I'd love to do that. I'd love your input. Please email me. My email is in the slides. It's in the program, I think. Just feel free. Today's a really long day. I have another webinar tonight and I teach in between. So, well, we have the basic skills requirement talk tonight. So Rosemary, make sure they know that that's you and your organization, because they might not realize, because that's, it's on the schedule, but what time is that on tonight? Is it 5? 5 tonight. And let me see if I can find, it's going to take me a minute. We're going to be hopefully demystifying the basic skills requirement. And I have a credential analyst from Cal Poly who will be there, and I'm trying really fast to find, because you can't sign up through Eventbrite, but oh, you know what? Renee and Leah have the link, and I think they would like you to register through them so they can have. We added it to the Zoom links that went out today, Rosemary. We put the exact in there, so I'm trying to pull it right now. Okay. Give me a second. I'll have it, everybody. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, I see. I have your email from this morning. Okay. Yeah,
I think this is gonna, hopefully it just worked. Yep, there it is.
okay.
Okay,
Okay, cool.
that's not the registration for that one closed yesterday. So what we did was we put the direct link, assuming people are like registered now.
Yeah. And so if you email me today, I probably won't return your email just because I go from this to a meeting to teach in person, and then I have to come back home to be ready to do the thing at 5. But I hope you'll join us there. And I just want to thank Renee and Leah and Bobby for putting this together, for bringing you all together, and for, like, I'm totally floored by the conversation in the chat. Thank you so much for participating, and I look forward to seeing you at our yet to be planned but future event.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. We appreciate you very, very much. I want to remind everybody who's on right now, our next session starts in 3 minutes. It's CalSTRS. We've only got them for one session. It's not recorded. It's about your financial future. So if you are considering being a teacher, jump on for sure. If you're currently an educator, it's also relevant for you. I recently met with CalSTRS, and I ended up finding out that I have more towards my retirement than I even realized. And I still have probably another 15 years before I get to retire, maybe even 20. But it's good to know because I want to be able to retire. I want to be able to pay my bills when I retire. So that's what this session is about, is knowing your financial future. We hope to see everybody. Rosemary, you are fantastic. Let's continue this conversation. Everybody have a great rest of the day, and I'll see most of you at the next session in just a minute.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Rosemary. That was wonderful.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.